I think you need to go back to the whys of what you're doing. You need to look at the whole canvas of success academically in the homeschooling movement and trust the Lord that this is going to work. If homeschooling was a failed experiment academically, we certainly would have known it by now. It would not have lasted for 4 or 5 decades with more and more people beginning to homeschool.
Welcome to Chia's California Homeschool Podcast. I'm Angela Lasch, and if you're listening to this in October or November, you might be in a very different place than you were back in late August, early September, when you just started homeschooling and everything felt fresh and full of possibility. But maybe those beautiful curriculum plans aren't unfolding quite like you imagined. Maybe your kids are struggling more than expected, or maybe you're even wondering if you're cut out for this homeschool journey. If that's you, friend, you are not alone, and you're definitely in the right place. Today, I'm joined by Zan Tyler, someone who has been encouraging homeschool hearts for over 3 decades. Zan's own homeschool journey began in the 80s when she was actually threatened with jail for her choice to homeschool. Since then, she has spent 30 years advocating for homeschool freedom and joyfully equipping parents to thrive in their homeschool journey. She's an uplifting speaker, author, and the host of the Zan Tyler podcast. Today, we're talking about something every homeschool parent faces, those seasons when doubt creeps in and whispers that maybe you're not doing enough, or maybe you're not qualified, or even maybe this whole thing was a mistake. Well, Zan is going to help us learn how to stand firm in our calling even when the path gets rocky. So grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and let's dive in. Hello, Zan. Welcome. I'm so excited that we are finally here to this point. We made it and we can finally get started. So are you ready?
I'm ready, Angela. Thank you so much for having me. I love Chia. I love the homeschooling moms and dads in California. And it's just been such a privilege for me to be a little part of it for the last 20 years.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have been a tremendous blessing to us. So that's why I'm so excited to have you on the podcast and just for people to hear just the wisdom that the Lord has just given you over the years. So let's hop in. Let's get started.
Sounds great.
All right. So, though we're not going to go through your whole history, though.
Right. No, we don't have time
No.
for that. We'll do that a little bit at the mini comms if people
Yes.
are available to come.
Yes. So, yeah, this will just be a little teaser.
Yes.
But
yes.
You have been part of the homeschool community since the 80s and under pretty dramatic circumstances. But let's just focus on the homeschool part. Do you remember those early moments, maybe that reality check when the honeymoon phase wore off?
Well, for you, just so our listeners and viewers know, when I started homeschooling in 1984, I didn't know anybody in the world who had homeschooled. And I'd just been threatened with jail by the state superintendent of education. There were no state support groups. There were no state orgs, support groups, HSLDA on the West Coast. So I was really pretty all alone. And I will never forget that because I kept saying, Lord, what am I supposed to do on Monday? You know, we'd been through all these fights and all these things. And I mean, had never seen anybody homeschool. And so it was really hard. I mean, I remember those days like they were yesterday. And so that's why I really want to encourage moms and dads today, especially in these early days. I remember I finally got to know Dr. Moore because I'd read his book, and he and Dorothy got to the point where I would talk to them maybe once or twice a week for the first 6 or 8 weeks I homeschooled. And that was just such a blessing. And so if there's anything I can say, especially to new or first 3 to 5 year homeschoolers out there, us veterans, we need to just be on board to help the new moms and dads sort of get their feet on the ground a little bit.
So I'm sure after all these years, you've talked to many parents and have had the chance to encourage them. So what do you tell somebody who thinks, this just isn't working, or maybe I'm not cut out for it. What do you typically tell them?
I would say the first thing you need to do, and somebody, I wish I could remember who gave me this advice before we started homeschooling, to write down why you are doing this. And I would give anything to find that piece of paper. But the truth is, I wrote it out on a piece of notebook paper. We didn't have laptops then. You didn't print everything, you wrote everything. And I just remember writing out, I mainly was trying to get my 6-year-old ready. We were holding him back a year for first grade, but there were other reasons. They were very undefined in my mind, but I just wrote down that I wanted him to love the Lord and I wanted Tida to be ready for first grade. And it was just this page. And every day I would go back to it. Really, I wore it out. That's why I don't have it, because I just wore the paper through with reading it. So the first thing is figure out your why. If you need help with your why, I'm just going to share this with you because I read this after I had been homeschooling for almost 20 years. I wish I had read this at the beginning. So going back to the founders of Harvard said this: let every student be plainly instructed and earnestly pressed to consider well. The main end of his life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ, which is eternal life, and to lay Christ as the bottom, the only foundation of all sound knowledge and learning. And so, our job as Christian parents is to love our children well and to lead them into a love for the Lord Jesus Christ. And that, everything else will come as you acclimate into the world of homeschooling. And I think education is extremely important, but the two foundational things of parents loving their children and laying Christ at the bottom of all sound foundation, a foundation of all learning and wisdom. I think that's just great advice. And then we can take a collective breath and move on. Um, Practical things, Angela. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so don't let me just keep. Yeah, don't
Well,
let me keep.
no, I love that so much. And I love that quote. I've heard it numerous times, and absolutely, it's so important. And, parents 100 years ago, 200 years ago, in the 80s now, that the why, I mean, should really not be any different, regardless
Yeah,
of what century we're in, what decade we're
yes,
in.
that's right. That's exactly right. And then I would just tell parents a couple of things. They're so fortunate to have the staff at Chia and support groups, homeschooling moms who have come before them. So find a mentor mom. But mainly, I would say if you've chosen your curriculum, which you probably have done at this point, don't feel like you have to get the whole thing done in the first month or even the first year. I don't think I ever finished a textbook in public school because I think my teachers even then knew that wasn't the goal, was just to finish the textbooks. And so I would say have a realistic schedule. We in the United States, we're bad about wanting to make everything a sprint instead of a marathon, but you're doing a lot of seed planning right now, and it takes a while to see it grow. If you're bringing kids home from a school situation, you've got to give them grace as they figure out a new schedule and routine. If you're just homeschooling your first grader for the first time, you also need to give that child a lot of grace. Is he ready to read? Does she know phonics? Is she capable? Can you relax? So I would just tell you to step back, relax, and take a day at a time.
I love that. I love the practical advice. But I also know we are living in a very different time between social media and I know I struggle with comparison, and there wasn't even social media back then. But
Right.
now
Yes.
all we
Yes.
see are all these amazing homeschool moms posting their highlight reels of their perfect days, their perfectly dressed children, baking, cooking, gardening, making this homeschool fantasy world seem like this is our ideal. This is what we need to be striving for. So what do you tell them, to the parents that are struggling with that comparison?
Okay. I will tell you the first thing is that comparison will kill your homeschooling and it will kill your soul. Comparison does one of two things. It either makes you feel like, oh, I'm doing better than that person. That's pride. Or, man, I can't keep up with that person. And that leads to envy. So comparison leads to nothing good. I'll tell you this. I spoke at a support group after my last child had graduated, so I'd homeschooled for 21 years. But in the early days, there was nobody to compare myself to, which was a little glorious, I have to say. And Joe said, "How was it?" And I said, "Well, I can honestly say I'm glad I started homeschooling in the 80s because I wouldn't have been good enough for this group." And so we have to surround ourselves with people who will encourage us and not judge us. And I think that's important too. But don't be thankful. The antidote to envy and pride is thankfulness. Be thankful for your family, your home, your husband, and your children. The Lord gave you your children to minister to and not somebody else's. They're going to come with their own set of strengths, their own set of weaknesses, their own gifts that bring you joy, and their own personalities that bring you frustration. And so you cannot do that to yourself. Be thankful for your own children. I will say this was hilarious. I just realized, even as I finished homeschooling, I could not do Pinterest because I'm not a visual person. I'm an auditory person. I mean, almost all the way, 100%. And so I'd see these beautiful visual classrooms, and I think, I cannot go here. If you can get ideas, do it. If you can't, just stay off. But the funniest thing was, there was this woman who had done this beautiful classroom, and her husband had gotten a transfer to Italy, and she couldn't decide if she wanted to leave this gorgeous classroom to take her kids to Italy for the year. I mean, it shows you how caught up we get in the wrong things. I love what Harriet Beecher Stowe's brother, who was a pastor, said. The mother's heart is the child's classroom. So focus on your heart, and your children will have the best homeschool experience ever.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I haven't heard that quote before, and yeah, I'm going to have to write that down. I love that. All right, so you have such a gift for speaking to parents' hearts. I've already been so blessed by everything you have just shared right now. So, what would you say to the mom who might be wondering if she made the right choice to homeschool? Because everything is feeling just extremely chaotic right now.
There are two things that every homeschool mom that I know anyway has asked themselves repeatedly: Am I enough? And am I ruining my kids? And so I think you need to go back to the whys of what you're doing. You need to look at the whole canvas of success academically in the homeschooling movement, and trust the Lord that this is going to work. If homeschooling was a failed experiment academically, we certainly would have known it by now. It would not have lasted for 4 or 5 decades with more and more people beginning to homeschool. So you just need to realize that there's no better way to teach your children than a one-on-one tutorial method. You've picked out a curriculum that you think is going to work well. The great thing about homeschooling is you can change. Make sure you have one mom in your life that you can call. It may not be somebody who's your best friend, but that you've seen. I had been homeschooling for like 7 years when I started homeschooling Lizzie, my daughter. I'd been homeschooling 2 boys, and now I'm homeschooling my daughter, and I'm going to be a girl mom. And so I called my friend and I said, I just need your help. I want to know everything you did with Amy. And not because I wanted my daughter Lizzie to be this carbon copy of her. I just wanted to pick her brain. And so, we just all need help. So if you can identify one mom that you admire, you love her children, she's a couple of years ahead of you, you don't need to meet with her 2 hours a week. That would be overwhelming for her. But if you've got her on text, and the days you need a little bit of help, you can get it. I think that's just always a help. And then you've got Chia. You have the Chia staff. You have the regional reps. You have a lot of places to go for support now.
Yeah, that is so important. Yes. Now, you again have been doing this for a while, like, but you're done homeschooling, but you're
Yes.
still advocating for homeschooling. You're still encouraging families. So, what keeps you passionate about reminding parents that they can do this?
Well, I have seen homeschooling go from 0 to 100 in the last 40 years. If you had told me when I was in, my school, we did have a schoolroom when we first started. I was in my schoolroom crying because I didn't know a soul in the world that homeschooling would explode like this, I would have never believed it. And so, Angela, remind me of your question. I'm sorry.
But just yeah, what just keeps you going after
Oh,
all
okay.
these
So
years?
I
Yeah.
remember what it was like not to have that support. And so I feel like my adult life as a homeschooling mom has just been to encourage people. So, whether it's working, now I work with BJU Press Homeschool, and we have consultant moms. I started and ran a state homeschooling organization. I'm still on the board, where our goal is just to support and encourage moms. I really believe homeschooling is worth all the hard days, the sleepless nights, the questioning yourself, all of those things, because the results are amazing. We're seeing children who are doing well academically, they're living in the realms of their giftedness, they're loving God. It's just a great way to educate your kids. And I can be the person standing at the finish line cheering you on, because in the marathon, you're going to hit those miles, 10 miles, or the second mile, or the 10th mile, or the 20th mile, and you're going to think, I want to quit. And, perseverance is a great character trait that we don't focus on much anymore. But if you want to do an interesting study, do a study in scripture on perseverance and faith, and see how much the two are linked together and what a premium God puts on perseverance. So, hang in there. Give yourself the freedom to hang in there. If you're particularly tired and things aren't going well, take a day off. I encourage moms to interview their kids, make a list of field trips they'd like to take. And on those days where academics isn't going particularly well and you need to get out of the house, go. I would say flexibility is one of the greatest gems of homeschooling.
Zan, this has been such an encouragement, and I'm so excited that you are going to be coming to California. People will actually be able to see you. And I don't know if you remember when you were here, I think it was last year, and I was introducing you. I just described you as like that warm cup of tea, or like just hearing you was like getting a hug, because you can just hear just the joy and the passion and that you have, that you want to encourage these parents that they absolutely can homeschool. And that is the reason why I'm still, I guess, in the homeschooling movement too, even though I'm done, because I just want people to know that they absolutely can do it. So people will be able to see you in person. They'll be able to hear you in November. On November 8th, you're going to be in Fresno. No, I said that backwards. In November 8th, you're going to be in Redding. And in November 15th, you're going to be in Fresno. So, what can families expect if they get to come hear you in person?
Well, I hope more than anything, we'll be able to chat during the course of the mini com and just visit together. I think I speak so that I can talk to homeschooling moms. But I'm gonna be doing 3 workshops. One is on homeschooling. It's a revival that begins in your living room, a God-centered revival and I just want to encourage you of the power in your own home. We're going to talk about when homeschooling gets hard, when reality sets in, and when you have days like my friend said. She called me up and she said, I'd rather have a root canal than homeschool today. And then we all have those glorious days. And then I do one on conversation and talk, and how our words mean something to our children. The power of life and death is in the tongue. And so something as simple and free as conversation can make or break your school year. And so we'll talk about that a little bit too.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait. Now, what would you say to somebody who is just on the fence about, do I really need to attend? Because I can watch all this online now. We're in a different generation. They can hear podcasts, they can watch YouTube videos. So why is it so important to go to these in-person events?
It's interesting. There's just something about gathering physically where we need each other. I was getting ready to go to Czech in Colorado. This has been years ago. And I started looking at the life of Jesus, and he was a people magnet. And everywhere he went, he drew crowds. But it was important for him to be with people. I think it's important for us to be, I mean, we just sort of, I don't mean we get lazy, but it's hard to get up and go somewhere. You bring the kids or you find a place for the kids. You've got to get dressed. You've got to get out the door at a certain time. And we're not used to that anymore. But I would say that effort really pays off, because you might be sitting next to somebody and you say, "Oh, how long have you been homeschooling?" And they say 4 years, and you say, "I'm new." And somehow you just start pouring out your heart to that mom, and she's got an answer to your problems. There is something, so I don't like to use the word magical, but really almost, when you get together with other homeschool moms and dads and you can talk to them about your struggles and how they handled it. You can pray together. You make new friends together. You may find that mentor mom you've been looking for together. There's just something about being in the same room with other people.
Yes, and I'm so excited. I cannot wait to see you.
Well, I can't wait to see you again. It's been too long. It's been over a year now.
Oh, well,
So,
thank you again, Zan, so much for taking the time out of your day to record this podcast. And I'm really praying it's going to bless a lot of the parents
well,
that hear it.
thank you. Do you have time for me to share a story? I don't know why I feel compelled.
Absolutely.
This is not a
Yes.
normal story that I normally share, but I was talking to a mother, and she had just been crying about her children, and she said, "Am I ever going to stop crying?" And it really made me think about the place of tears in scripture. God says he collects our tears in a bottle. They don't go to waste. Those who sow in tears reap in joy, bringing their sheaves with them, which I think are our children. But, I was up one night in the middle of the night praying and crying over one of my children. And it dawned on me, I don't know that I was a good student. I was pretty well behaved. But I don't think I ever had a teacher that loved me enough and was committed enough to my welfare that they were up at 2 o'clock in the morning praying because I couldn't get an algebra problem or I had a character deficit. We're not the hired hands. We don't run when the wolf is coming, when the trouble is coming. And so I think sometimes we worry when we're crying over our children, or we're worried about their academic success, or we're worried about a character issue. It's just that we see so much more of their lives than a classroom teacher ever could. And I really think that deep connection you have with your children is what makes homeschooling successful, that and prayer. So the first few years we started homeschooling, I mean, especially the first year, I would wake Joe up at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was like this alarm clock went off my head. And I would say, "Do you know what my neighbor said to me today about homeschooling? Do you know what this lady in the grocery store said?" Everybody felt like they could comment on my life. And finally, after this had gone on for about 3 or 4 weeks, Joe looked at me and said, "Zan, Jesus is always awake." And it hurt my feelings because Joe is my best friend. I thought he really wanted to hear all that, but it changed my prayer life. And so I want to tell you, when the tears come or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're scared or worried that you're not enough, you're not doing enough, you're about your child, get up and pray. Don't lay there and worry. Get up and pray. It really transformed my prayer life and my walk with the Lord. And so let those things, don't let them drive you away from homeschooling. Let them drive you to the one who can help you with your homeschooling. I don't know why I felt so compelled to share that. That's been on my mind all morning.
I'm so thankful that you did, that you heard the Lord's prompting to share, because well, even with adult children and now grandchildren, yes, the most important thing you can do is pray, and
Yes.
you love them more than anybody. Your
That's right.
kids.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Nobody, with 99% of the moms, nobody can ever love a child like they do.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. Thank you. All right, Zan, this has been such a blessing, and I cannot wait to see you.
Well,
Gosh,
thank you
in a
so
couple
much,
months.
Angela. And listen, I'd just like to say, if you'd like to hear more, you can visit my podcast and find me at zantyler.com. I'd love to be able to meet with you on a weekly basis. And Angela, thank you so much for having me. I love Chia. I love the work you're doing. It's just a real honor and privilege to be here.
Oh, no, thank you. It's been a privilege having this conversation. And yes, I'm glad you mentioned your podcast, because it has been such an encouragement to me. I love listening to it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And I will
Okay.
see you in a couple
See
months.
you soon. That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Okay. What an encouraging conversation. Thank you so much, Zan, for sharing your heart and wisdom with our Chia families. I know there are parents listening who needed to hear every word of what you shared today. Friends, I want to leave you with this truth. The doubt you're feeling does not disqualify you from this calling. In fact, it often means you care deeply about doing right by your children. Remember, God does not call the equipped, He equips the called. And if He's placed this desire to home educate your children on your heart, He will give you everything you need to walk it out faithfully. If today's conversation has encouraged you, imagine getting to sit in a room with Zan and other homeschool families who understand exactly what you're going through. So please mark your calendars for November 8th in Redding and November 15th in Fresno. Sometimes the best antidote to doubt is being surrounded by your people who can remind you that you're not alone in this calling. You can find all the details and register on our website, chiaofca.org. And remember, you're not walking this journey alone. The Chia community is here to support you, encourage you, and remind you that you can do this. Not because you're perfect, but because you're faithful. Until next time, keep pressing on. Your children are blessed to have you as their parent and teacher. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Brought to you by thepodcastupload.com, empowering faith-driven voices.